Welcome back. Today you're in for a major pump up. I think you'll enjoy. Let's get to the stories. Lab rat. Being young isn't an excuse for being naive. But in the story I'm about to tell you, I was both. Well, luckily for me, standing up for what I believe helped me escape my inevitable fate. When you escape terror, like I did, you become aware of its existence. It's as if you suddenly realize death is always around the corner, waiting, chasing, crouching, ready to jump at you. I was 17 and was a senior. The end of the year meant the end of an era. I was leaving the city, the state, and my family, and finally starting my new life elsewhere. To be honest, I was feeling vertigo as the end of the year was approaching. We were out at my friend's house. Her parents traveled a lot, and we used her house as a party ground most of the time. We were a small group, only 7 people. Fellow students called us nerds, but we sure did know how to have fun. The problem was that, as we were hanging out by the pool waiting for the sun to set and give way to the night in the party, the bullies showed up. I have no idea to this day how they found out about the party. The bullies played on the school's basketball team. Mark, the captain, who was shirtless and showing off standing on the trampoline, looked straight at me and said, "When I get out of this shithole and go to college, I'm gonna be a different person. You'll see. My Instagram stories are gonna go viral. I'm gonna hang out with LeBron. We're changing the world." I looked back at him and answered, "I'm turning the world into a sustainable place. We can't continue to live this way. I'm going to be the change I want to see in the world." His teammates laughed at me, but I was 100% sincere in my answer. Part of being naive was thinking words are a good means of communication with bullies. I was so full of dreams back then that I could barely contain myself. Little did I know about what waited for me that night and the upcoming years. Changing the world turned out to be much harder than I thought it would be. The planet is far more intricate than my adolescent self could even begin to comprehend. The sun finally fell, and the night came upon us. It was a calm, warm, and beautiful evening. We had booze, music, friends, and a ton of unfulfilled dreams to pursue. The bullies eventually settled in, and Mark and I ended up on the living room sofa talking about the future again. "So you're going to change the world by studying biology?" "I think the future is going to be more about influencers and social media than lab rats." "Well, the world definitely needs more scientists and less hype, don't you think? All influencers do is just talk badly about people and laugh at those who are different. To be honest, I don't like influencers all that much. I'm going to be different. I'm going to rule Instagram like a boss. Not only that, but I'll be a basketball star, you'll see. The entire world will be at my feet. They're going to lick them. But I'll be a good ruler though, a kind king. I'll make the internet a better place." "Well, you already are the basketball team captain. But I don't see you doing much to change the world for the better, Mark. You're more worried about looking good and dunking that ball than ending world hunger." "Yeah, but don't I look awesome?" "I know I do. Don't I make you want me when you see those pictures dunking the ball? Look, I always thought you were cute. A cute little lab rat." As he finished that sentence, he leaned over me and tried to kiss me. I avoided him. I wasn't going to kiss a guy who called me a goddamn lab rat. It was out of the question. I'm not a fucking lab rat. How dare you call me that? Goodbye, Mark. Have fun conquering the world from behind your cell phone. By the way, your content fucking sucks. All you do is show off your muscles, you narcissistic asshole. That's when it all started. I said that in front of everybody and stormed out into the backyard. I was upset but trying to calm down. I wasn't going to let any guy ruin one of the last nights I had to spend with my friends. Suddenly, I felt a hand over my shoulder. It was Mark behind me. "Excuse me, girls, can I steal this cute lab rat from you for a few minutes? I just want to clear something out with her." I felt fear crawling up my spine. The neurochemicals flooded my brain with one word: Danger. I shook my head to the sides. They said no, but that only caused Mark to call for the rest of his basketball buddies to come after me. You shouldn't have said that. You'll regret calling our captain an asshole, you filthy lab rat. The captain wasn't alone. He had his own bootlicking lieutenant to speak for him. I don't know where I got the strength from. I think it was that mix of being young and careless about consequence, but I replied, "You're right. He's not the only asshole in the group. You all are." "This is not over yet," said Mark, looking at me and making a sign with his index finger going across his throat horizontally. They stormed off and we continued the party. The air around us was tense, but we tried our best to keep up the spirit. After all, it was only 10 p.m. and the whole thing was barely starting. Yet the revenge of the basketball team was just around the corner. 3 full hours went by, and by 1 a.m, we were all dancing and taking selfies in the living room while Darren, my best friend, was DJing. Suddenly, all the lights went off. The music ended abruptly and we heard the roaring engines coming from the street. The basketball team was back. They demanded me to get out of the house alone and nobody would get hurt. I asked my friend, the house owner, where she kept her chemistry set and where the cleaning chemicals were. She pointed to the laundry room and that's where I went. "Tell them I'll be out in 15 minutes, I said before heading off. They made it into the house and hit a couple of my friends. Mark was holding a baseball bat. He used it to destroy Darren's DJ turntables and a few ornaments. It looked like he'd been drinking or doing drugs or something from what I heard. He was out of himself. "Come on, come out, lab rat. You don't want me to turn any of your friends into a disabled teenager now, do you?" Mark screamed at me. I came out 5 minutes later. The living room was a mess. Darren was on the floor being held and beaten by 3 people. Mark was looking at me, holding the baseball bat. "You'll pay for what you said, lab rat. No girl dodges the captain and smiles with all her teeth afterward, you know?" "Why don't you come closer, Mark? Now that I've seen what a real man looks like, I'm dying to get that kiss." Mark smiled, walked over to me, and grabbed me by the waist with one hand while he held the bat on the other. I felt his big, rough hands touch my skin and my entire body shivered. Fear was coming like a tsunami trying to paralyze me, but I knew how my body worked, and I was a smart young girl on a mission. I undid the lid on my bottle and dropped the acid I had prepared on his feet. It was quite diluted and not so strong to leave him handicapped, but nonetheless his sneakers melted. He fell back, trying to hit me with the bat without any success. I dropped some more on his shirt and jeans and he crawled all the way to his friends, crying, yelling with his pants melting. He was left shivering in his underwear, begging for me to stop it. And that's when I threw a bucket of dirt on him and stopped the reaction. "Does any other basketball hotshot want to try what this lab rat can do?" I defied the team, holding the bottle in my hand. They ran away like little children, screaming and shouting, and didn't come back or near me in school ever again. Never underestimate the power of a woman who knows a thing or two about chemistry. Or the abrasiveness of a homemade acid. Hidden in the mist. I feel free when I run. It's my moment. I'm all alone. Worries fly away and merge with the wind with every step I take. I feel lighter, and everything related to children, work, husband, chores, and taxes just vanishes from my thoughts. I still run 3 times a week. I always do it at the crack of dawn. The city around me is still. It moves slowly, and I leave it all behind one step after another. I think my mental health depends on my early morning runs. That morning, the morning I had to fight for my life, mist covered most of the landscape. It's not something that happens all too often, but it does happen from time to time. I could see very little around me. Running in the mist is the closest thing to my marriage at the time. We were going full speed, trying to raise a family on a boat that was sinking fast. My husband was my high school sweetheart. We had been the envy of the entire class. Yet there we were, 20 years later, hating each other's guts. I was thinking about that when I started running. We had had a big fight the night before. He had lost his job as a journalist because his boss said he was a misogynist. He came to me trying to convince himself that he wasn't a self-centered misogynist man. Of course, I didn't lie to him. He was a misogynist, and a violent one too. He would often get up while we were having dinner and leave the room with no excuse to smoke pot in the basement or play video games. If I went after him or said anything about it, he would grab me and shake me, pretending he was going to hit me with an open hand. And that was just the first warning. I felt so alone and irritated washing dishes and putting the kids to bed when I heard him laugh, high as the Empire State Building in his man cave at the other end of our house. It was his third job that year. It was always the same lame excuse. I don't need that job, I'm too good for them. Meanwhile, he was begging for an extension of my dad's black card to buy video games online. Come on. My family was wealthy and they paid for several of our expenses. I talked to my dad and he came over to talk to him. From man to man, you know how these things are. Well, my dad ended up in the hospital. That was the second warning. That same week, he threw a dish at the wall and smashed it into 1,000,000 pieces while screaming at me and the children having lunch. That was the third warning. By the time this story took place, his dark persona was like a black hole in my living room. He was starting to be a bad example for the kids. All I needed was a way to tell him to get out of my life. My mind was circling around that thought when he suddenly appeared out of the mist in the middle of the road right ahead of me. What are you doing here? What do you want? You're here all by yourself. The kids are not around, and your daddy certainly isn't either. You smell like booze. What do you want? Leave me alone. I tried to run past him, putting my headphones back, but I felt him grabbing my arm. What are you doing? Let me go. We could talk about this when I get back. You're not going anywhere. I got you a little present. I'm sick of you thinking you're better than me. He took out a large nylon bag from his back pocket and showed it to me. This is going to be your new home, pumpkin pie. You won't tell me I'm a misogynist loser ever again. He took out a knife from the back of his jeans, letting go of my hand for a moment. I tried to run in the opposite direction and fell on the floor. I turned around right when he jumped on me and tried to stab me. We rolled to the side of the road. I was holding his knife with both hands and he was trying to take it away from me. It was such a drunken, lost case he must have forgotten I took 3 years of personal defense classes and he drove me to it every week. Come on, man. Using what I learned, I turned him over, took the knife away, hit him with my elbow on the eyebrow, and then applied a wrench that left him completely immobilized and asking for air and mercy. I sat over him and called the cops. By the time they arrived, he'd passed out already. He did move out of our house, but I'd say his new accommodation was less amenable. After all, it was a jail cell. No place for you. This place is no good for women like you. That's a line I heard many times before. I'm no stranger to hard work. I grew up in a rough neighborhood. It's not that easy to scare me. Well, the night I'm about to talk to you about, scared is the smallest word I can use to describe how I felt. When you look at terror in the eyes, it doesn't look back at you. It pierces through you. It can see into you. And when terror looks inside your own abyss, your world is no longer yours. That feeling is something I will never forget. This was 20 years ago. I was only 25. As I said, I come from a very humble upbringing, but thanks to a sports scholarship, I was able to go to a good college. I had great grades and I ended up becoming a judge. Back then, though, I was a lawyer. I was working at a firm that wasn't small, but that wasn't any of the big ones either. I had a boss whose name was Jason. Well, not his real name, but let's keep it at that. He was a shitty human being. Misogynistic, violent, rude, and above all, conceited beyond all imagination. He wasn't just on top of Mount Olympus, he was Zeus himself. He treated me as if I was the last garbage down the bottom of the dumpster. He was always taking credit for my work, harassing me around the office. He had a very severe case of bad breath, and his hair was always greasy. But beyond all that, he was a violent, classist, narcissistic, sexist boss who wanted to make it up the ladder quicker than anyone else. He was going to use whatever means necessary to step over my head and keep me down while he propelled his career to the infinite. What a big-mouth hotshot wannabe. He even said to my face, "You'll always be worthless around here." You know it, right? Deep inside your gut, you're aware you're way out of your league here. Mr. Jason, please don't be offended, but I don't need your opinion. Oh, come on. You know what you have to do to get better gigs around here. Old Uncle Jason loves them petite and scared like you. Oh yeah, I can imagine it all. So tender, so sexy, so naive. What do you say? Tomorrow night, how's my place? Don't make me have to be more convincing. We don't want that to happen now, do we? I would just storm out of his office and go somewhere into the building where I could be alone and breathe for a moment. He was scary. His big mouth and his hairy fingers, the old-fashioned ugly cologne and the vintage clothing were intimidating. Although I was scared to death by his threats, he was my boss, and, like I said, nothing had been easy for me that far. I took it as it came and kept working, dedicating more and more time to my job. I would be inside the building 12 to 14 hours a day and just work and work and work until I fell asleep at my desk. I went home, took a shower, and made it back to the office. I did that for half a year. By the time I was done outworking the big-mouth former hotshot lawyer, Mr. Jason, he hadn't even realized the storm was coming. I remember it so well, the look on his face the day his boss communicated to the staff I was his new superior. That's when all hell came loose. I was afraid of his wrath, but I never foresaw there was a brutal murderer inside of him. That night, I was typing away in my office, his previous office, when I heard some noises down the hall. I thought it was his cleaning lady, Martha, with whom I had a great relationship. She reminded me of my mom. I got up from my chair to say hi, but when I opened the door, Jason was standing there. He had a black tuxedo with shiny shoes. "This is no place for women like you. This office is mine," he said to me with a dark look on his face. "Do you know why I'm wearing these clothes? Because it's your fucking funeral." He looked me straight in the eye and into the abyss inside of me. My deepest fears became a reality. The absence of my parents, a sense of solitude, loneliness, anxiety, abandon. That's what I feared the most, and that's exactly how I felt. He was wearing black gloves and pulled out a gun from inside the jacket. I was frozen, on the spot, looking into his somber eyes and thinking it was the end of me. I remember clearly the single drop of sweat going down my spine. "The building's full of cameras. You're going to jail for this, Jason. Just accept it. I'm the boss now. Drop the gun," I said and burst into tears, taking 2 steps back. He came closer, raised his hand, and the pistol's cannon shone under the dim office light. Just as he was going to shoot me, he fell on the floor unconscious. Martha stood behind him with a huge broom she had evidently just jammed into the crest of his neck and the top of his skull. That was the closest to death I've been in my life. I still think of Martha as the answer to my deepest fears, as the reminder I'm not alone. In all honesty, I feel like it was my mom saving me from a far distance.